Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for having us today. My name is Darrell Bear. I'm a technical marketer for Epic Games, and we're going to be spending the next 20 minutes or so walking you through what it's like to work inside of Twinmotion 2020. So this will give you a quick introduction to some of the basic concepts, as well as the types of outputs and things that you can do with Twinmotion 2020. So I'm going to share my screen and play back a presentation and just let you guys see what Twinmotion 2020 is all about. So hopefully you are seeing my screen, and let's go ahead and get this playing back. So this is the end results that we'll be working towards today in this project. It's a pretty good representation of the types of things you can do with Twinmotion 2020, highlighting some of the things we've been working on. So the improvements to depth of field, the very high quality vegetation, as well as humans. The assets that we're using originally started from Revit, and when you're inside of Revit, it's just a simple process of exporting these out. The first step is installing the Twinmotion 2020 exporter into Revit. So here we are inside of Revit, and I already have the exporter installed. So the process is very easy. You just go to the Twinmotion 2020 bar on the upper top side here and export out. So you can either save a file out, or you can see it in Twinmotion, which basically makes a connection between Twinmotion and Revit, which is what we'll do for this example. So the user interface is very simple. The geometry comes in, it automatically replaces the Autodesk materials with Twinmotion materials that have higher visual fidelity or higher quality. So using that Unreal game technology to give you this very high quality look. And I want to import in another set of geometry. This time it's going to be an FBX file coming from 3ds Max, and that's going to give us the rest of the environment that this geometry should be set on. So what we want to do is we want to use this main menu bar you see on the bottom here this is the main element that you'll use to drive the Twinmotion. So you can specify where the object lives or where the geometry exists geopositionally, as well as time of day. You can also change the background image. So for this example, we just want a simple gradient. So now that we've done that, a couple other UI elements. On the right-hand side, you have your scene hierarchy. So this is going to show the structure of your scene, as well as some basic statistics for your frame rate, geometry count, things of that nature. You can also actually do numerical inputs of geometry transformations on this right-hand side. We have another expandable user interface element on the left-hand side. This is where your materials, your objects, all the things that you're going to use to make the scene look beautiful live on the left-hand side. So the main menu structure on the bottom is your dock or your panel. Left-hand side has your materials, and the right-hand side has your scene hierarchy. To add materials, it's just a simple drag and drop operation. So you can see that I'm very quickly changing the look and feel of this by just dropping on these very high quality, predefined materials that exist inside of Twinmotion. So let's go ahead and frame in on this parking lot, and let's jump in and add a few more materials. This time some metals. So we'll go ahead and jump up one more level and kind of adjust the scale of this asphalt. It's a little bit too large. So with that done, we'll jump back up to the top of this and go into the metals. I want to put a brushed aluminum on the parking structure. And then on the triangular shaped roofs, I'm going to go ahead and grab a kind of a stamped steel or a tiled steel. So we'll drop that on the triangled roofs. We'll use the same material on the facade of this building. Now keep in mind that you can always adjust the attributes for scale, color, and if you click on the More button, you'll get things like rotation and the tiling both in the U and the V direction. So lots of control to modify the out-of-the-box materials. Of course, you can also add your own texture maps to these if necessary. So the next thing that we want to talk about is vegetation. And this has been an area that we've put a lot of focus on the last couple of releases of Twinmotion. So we'll jump back up to the top of the library and we'll go into the trees section and just drop in a couple of trees simply by dragging them into the viewport. So with a couple of trees added in, let's go ahead and zoom in on these guys and talk about a few of the things that are special. So in Twinmotion, we're leveraging the power of Unreal Engine. So things like this backlighting and the subsurface scattering of the leaves, that really beautiful sky model, these are all the things that Twinmotion brings to the table to give you this very high visual fidelity or this photorealistic look. Now, the trees have several different ways of adding them to your scene. We obviously just dragged and dropped a few in, but we can also use a paint workflow. So what I'm going to do is drop down 3 different trees here. And one thing that's special about the trees is they have different ages. So you can see as I make a tree young or I make a tree old, not only do they change in scale, but they also change the way the foliage or the branches grow. So this allows you to see how your site will change with age, new construction versus when it's maybe 20 or 30 years old. So it's a very powerful feature. And this built-in intelligence happens across all of the vegetation inside of Twinmotion. So the next way of adding trees into your environment is just a simple painting operation. So I'm going to take this spruce tree and just start painting where I want it to exist. Now you'll notice that as I paint, I get this little pulsating, highlighting look. That's showing everywhere that trees can now exist, and I can at any time adjust the density, the amount of trees that will exist within that painted region. It's a very non-destructive workflow, so at any time if I want to add more vegetation, in this example some ferns, I can just simply grab the fern and begin adding it into that same painted area. And of course, I have the ability to adjust the density of the ferns independently of the spruce trees. So it gives you a lot of creative freedom downstream. It's very flexible. It's always live. It's always easy to go back and make changes or modifications to any of the work that you've done inside of Twinmotion. So painting trees is powerful, but often you're going to have a very large area that you want to populate. So we also have a scattering tool that allows you to, again, drag and drop down into the lower dock what trees you want to have scattered. You select the tree and then just grab the plus sign and begin clicking on the geometry you want to have scattered. The more times I click, the more trees that I get. And you can see that we now have a whole forest of trees, but Twinmotion still remains very fast and fluid. This is because it's using gaming technology to achieve this. It's using level of details, and it's also culling the geometry that doesn't exist on the screen. So the final way that we're going to add geometry or trees in is to import in some hero objects. So this example, I'm going to bring in dummy trees. And this is basically just geometry that I placed in my CAD application, knowing exactly where I wanted a few hero trees. And we can use a search replace function inside of Twinmotion to very quickly replace these objects with a specific tree. So we'll grab in our pine tree, and I'll just click the start replace button, and you can see that it's now replaced all of those dummy cubes with that specific piece of vegetation. So we'll do the same thing for some spruce trees. We'll drag and drop that into our dock and hit start replace. And just like that, we've now got trees. These need to be a little taller, so we'll just scale those guys up with the growth slider. We've now got trees positioned exactly where I want them inside of that parking structure. So that's just a few ways that you can add vegetation into your CAD data very, very quickly. So let's go ahead and look at the asphalt here. They're slightly different colors. So I'm going to go ahead and use my paint swatch tool to sample this material, and we'll just drop the color intensity down a bit so that they match a little bit better. And the scaling looks a bit wrong on that parking lot. So we'll just manually put in a number, a numerical value there to make those match a bit more. And the next thing we want to do is talk about vehicles. Again, very easy to do and fast inside of Twinmotion. So we're going to import in geometry. We're going to tell it to keep the hierarchy. By saying keep hierarchy, we're maintaining each individual node, each placement node. So we're going to bring in a variety of cubes, and we're going to search and replace those with some vehicles. So again, using the outliner on the right-hand side, I'll select all of my dummy cars. We'll go back to the search and replace, and we'll go over to the left-hand panel and jump up to the vehicle section, and we'll go into cars. And I'm just going to drag into my dock a few cars that I want to have randomly scattered across and replaced where these dummy cubes are. So we'll say start replace, and it does it. Now at any time I can go back into any individual car and modify it or change its color, as you can see there where we just made the car a bit different in color. So adding moving vehicles is also very fast and easy to do inside of Twinmotion. I want cars traveling down the road. So we're going to go back to our main dock. We're going to go into vehicle path, and I'm just going to use the pen tool to lay down a few points where I want the vehicles to travel. So I'm basically making a Bezier curve that's going to define the path that the vehicles will drive along. So we'll just kind of finish this off and click the enter key. And as soon as I do that, we now have animated vehicles moving down that path. Of course, we can adjust the density, how many lanes of traffic, the direction they're going in, lots of different attributes that you can modify. We can also non-destructively change the position of the curve. So if I want the cars to be a little bit pushed over to the right, I can just grab that point and update the path that they're traveling on. So very fast to add these high quality vehicles into your project with Twinmotion 2020. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and talk about humans. So humans are very similar to the car workflow. Again, we're going to go back into our library. We'll jump up to characters. I'm going to grab groups of humans in this example, and I'm just going to start to drop these down. Now, every time I add a group in, they'll be slightly different than the previous group. And you also have the ability to modify each individual attribute or character. So I can grab this female character, go ahead and maybe change the animation that she's doing. That's a little ridiculous, but I think we'll roll with it. And then of course, you can also change what their outfit looks like. So you can drop them in, and then you have a variety of different kind of canned examples that you can kind of flick through to get them to work for the type of thing that you want to do. And there's lots of things like people talking on cell phones, people sitting. There's some handicapped actors, like people in wheelchairs, things like that. So it's a very, very fast to add these high quality photogrammetry based assets that are obviously animated with motion capture. So one of the things that's really great about Twinmotion is the fact that it has this inherent intelligence built into all the materials. So as I change the weather, you can obviously see we have a particle system adding rain to the scene, but all of the materials now appear as though they're wet. They have puddles, they have streaks, the sky model changes, and as the season changes, again, because of that inherent built-in procedural nature of the Twinmotion materials, it all just sort of works. And of course, you have that growth model on those trees to adjust the overall age of your project. So everything has a connection to each other inside of Twinmotion 2020, which is really pretty awesome. So another thing that's really pretty great is the lighting model. And this has had a lot of work put into it over the last couple of releases. So as we drop the sun down, you can see we get this beautiful glowing kind of golden hour. You get the nice glow effects, the bloom, the lens flares, all of that just works out of the box inside of Twinmotion because again, it's leveraging all that underlying power of the Unreal Engine to generate these visuals. So the location allows you again to geoposition locate like lat and longitude, as well as set the date and the time. We also have a smog model that allows you to enter in volumetric effects. So you're going to see these volumetric rays streaking through the trees. That layered with all the glowing effects and the lens flare effects gives you this very nice, thick, atmospheric look and feel. And of course, we're getting that subsurface scattering traveling through the leaves of those trees. And this just looks absolutely gorgeous as you kind of fly your camera around. It's worth noting that I'm running this on a NVIDIA-based chipset. I'm using a Quadro 2080 for this example, but this works well on any modern computer. Obviously, the more power you have in the GPU, the better. So the next thing that we want to talk about is a few more of these lighting effects. So let's go ahead and just change that day of time using the eyeball to quickly access that in the upper right-hand corner. Get this back to more of a midday look. And we're going to go ahead and add in a few more groups of people hanging out on this deck. And we want to talk about some of the changes and improvements that we've made to the camera model. So the camera model is very sophisticated inside of Twinmotion 2020. What we're going to do is this is going to be our hero character. So let's go ahead and position him. This looks pretty good. I'm going to change his animation. And also let's give him a slightly different outfit by switching the color preset. So this gentleman is our hero, and what we want to do is we want to look at some of the depth of field improvements that we've made. So I'm going to jump back into my camera. So you can do non-photorealistic looks as well as these photorealistic looks. So we've added some vignetting in there. I'm going to change the focal length to give us kind of a, like a 50 or a 60 field of view on our camera here to get some nice shallow depth of field. And I'm just going to turn on depth of field. So this uses a circle of confusion algorithm, extremely fast and very, very high quality. So we'll set the face as our focal point, and you can see as I kind of pan the camera around or orbit the camera around here, this beautiful isolation that we get of our hero character versus that kind of very shallow depth of field blurred out background. And that looks pretty awesome. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is just turn off the depth of field and jump back up to our main library and go into tools. There's some new tools that we recently added. You can now have notes. These notes are great for telling people areas of key interest. So in this example, I'm actually going to pass a note back to my colleague working in Revit. So you can export the notes out of Twinmotion through a BCF file that's then importable into Revit. So we're going to jump back into Revit and use those notes that said to open the door. So we'll just change this the properties on this to be an open door, and we'll just say see in Twinmotion one more time. And as soon as we do that, you can see the changes are non-destructive. So all the work we did after that initial import is maintained. So it gives you the ability to work in a very iterative example. So I'm bringing in another FBX file. This time I just imported in the mechanicals for the site. So you can see if we drop below the ground level, we've got some electrical and some plumbing kind of running throughout and some water pipes running throughout. We now have an X-ray ability. So I'm going to turn X-ray on for each one of these, maybe set some unique individual colors for each one. And with X-ray enabled on those materials, you can see as we go above the ground, we have the ability to see or X-ray those objects through to get a good understanding in context what's happening with the mechanicals for this project, which is really great if you're trying to create a narrative or tell a story. Now, of course, anytime you brought geometry in, if you don't want to see it, you can always disable it on the right-hand side in that folder structure that we saw previously. So with that done, the next thing that we want to talk about is telling stories. So the eyeball gives us some quick access to change the day of time, as well as quickly jump into VR with one mouse click. So we'll just change the time here a little bit, make it a little bit longer shadows, and we're going to drop into the media section. So within media, we can create images, 360 panoramas, videos, and presenters. And presenters we'll talk a bit more about in depth later in the presentation. They're special. So I already have a few images set up, and these are very easily made. And every time you create an image, it remembers the state inside of Twinmotion. So for this example, I don't have the MEP turned on. The next image is the exact same place, but MEP is enabled. So very easily used to do things like staging or phasing. So same image, this time the day of time has been turned to night, and you can see the auto exposure kick in, and notice the effect around those glowing lanterns. That's actually being done with screen-based GI. So that's something that was newly introduced in Twinmotion 2020. And screen-based GI is very, very fast to calculate, and it really does start to simulate the effect of that global illumination, distributing that bright object across the scene. So it's a very powerful post-processing effect that Twinmotion can do, which just looks really awesome. So how do you create your own images? Well, it's really simple. We'll just take that back image and just frame it on this this decking that we were playing around with a bit earlier. And to create a new snapshot or image, you just click the plus sign, and now we have made that new spot or that new hero image. So that's how easy it is to start generating media that you could then output. You know, you could render that out at 2K, 4K, it doesn't really matter. You can then basically export those images out at very high quality. So let's talk about video next. It's a similar workflow. I've obviously laid out lots of different videos already, but you just click the create video button, and it makes a snapshot of the current state of your scene. You can then basically use the camera navigation controls. So it uses standard first-person shooter navigation controls to kind of fly in here. And what I want to do is just sort of frame in on this road as the cars are kind of driving up to that parking structure and record that. So I do that by clicking the plus button. So by doing that, we've now made a 10-second animation. Of course, you could change the length or timing of that if you wanted. When you click the more button, we can have access to the time of day. So instead of just having a camera move happen, I also want to have a time elapse effect happening of the sun changing over the day in conjunction to that camera move or with that camera move. So as that kind of happens, let's just jump back to our animation and scrub through that. You can see we now have a camera move as well as that time of day changing. Now, of course, if you want to modify the position of the camera or reframe the shot, you have that flexibility. So it's a very non-destructive workflow. Just click the recapture button, and just like that, we've changed where that end keyframe actually exists. So that's how easy it is to set up animations inside of Twinmotion. So let's talk about the presenter. The presenter lets you create a linear narrative of all the different media that you've made. So you can drag and drop into your timeline thumbnails for all the images as well as the animations. It's worth noting that the presenter file has the ability to deviate from this linear story that you're laying out. So anytime a participant wants to fly around, because it's still a full 3D scene, they can break that narrative and begin exploring the scene if they desire. The other thing that's interesting about the presenter file is this is an executable that you can share with your customers or clients at any time. They do not need Twinmotion installed. So this makes a very easily distributable example of a real-time file that you can share with your customers or clients that they can play back. And the thing that's great about it is it has all the built-in hooks for VR right out of the box. So it's a very, very powerful feature inside of Twinmotion is this presenter. So that's basically what Twinmotion is about. I know we're going very, very fast, and I speak, they call it New Yorker English, so it's quick, but I hope that made sense to you guys. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to check out Twinmotion, and we're here to take a few questions now, now if you would like.